Today I'm going to do a big lesson on the amazing chord progression from the song I Know There's an Answer off the amazing, legendary Beach Boys album Pet Sounds from 1966. This song sounds kind of simplistic, but it's surprisingly complex, like most of the songs on Pet Sounds, and is definitely more than meets the eye as far as the chord progression goes. And most of the song is going to be about that and the songwriting secrets that kind of lie underneath of that songwriting structure, which is kind of what my channel is all about, exposing those, dark corners of songwriting that I don't really feel are covered very well here on YouTube or wherever. Before I get going on the lesson, I don't want to waste a bunch of your time. Please consider joining my Patreon, High Castle Conservatory. That's the best way you can support my music channel. Or check out my original music. I have sort of oldies Beach Boys sounding stuff with I.S.S. and then really out there sci-fi progressive stuff with High Castle Conservatory. All the links are in the description below to hear some of that music and support me in some of those other ways. I don't need to get into what an amazing album Pet Sounds is. You guys have heard me talk about it before, but it's really sort of a, orchestra meets pop music, just very highbrow, sophisticated pop music with a specific orchestra for each song that still mostly has like rock instruments, but adds weird things. And this song is no exception. He adds things like bass harmonica and things like that. And it's really quite an incredible production. There's no drums on the song, which is interesting because it's a driving kind of bluesy rhythm. There is very prominent tambourine, there's 12-string guitar, there's like a tack piano, clarinet, alto flutes, I think a couple of them, clarinet, 12-string mando guitar, there's a B3 organ that's pretty prominent, bass clarinet, bass harmonica, electric bass, stand-up bass, Brian did that a lot, multiple basses, playing often in unison, sometimes not, but pretty much mostly in unison, and also timpani. They really get a pretty big sound for leaving out drums, so we'll talk about some of that production stuff as we go, but mostly what we're going to do is get into the chord progression. If you haven't seen my chord charts before, they're pretty simple. You'll see these sunshines which state when we're in a key, and sometimes it's hard to fit really complex songs in a key, but I try my best to sort of pigeonhole it into a key, even when I'll admit that it's kind of flirting with multiple keys at one time. So you'll see the suns are a new key. You'll see the section names. You see the Roman numerals, which indicate what function this particular chord has of the key that we're in at that moment. Take that first bar, B flat is the one of the key of B flat. Okay, great. All the rest of that chord chart is pretty self-explanatory. I call these my chord analysis charts, and as my patron on Patreon, you will get these for every single lesson and be able to download them and print them out yourself. But these, I think, really help you understand the chord structure of songwriting. And chords are really I don't know what to call it, the bed or the subconscious of all Western music, pop songwriting that is chord progression driven. These are not drones or modal music like a lot of, certain Eastern music and things like that is. I don't want to oversimplify because I'm not an expert on Eastern music, but Western music is very much driven by chords. And I think studying chords is one of the best ways to improve your songwriting skills. And Brian Wilson was probably the greatest chord writer in the history of pop music. There's a couple other people you could make arguments for. Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon was pretty amazing. Steely Dan, There's a lot of bands that have a pretty high degree of sophistication. But Brian really had the market cornered, I think, earlier than anybody. So this song starts off with an intro that is 8 bars. I see this here. It's little 4 bars and a repeat, and it's really simplistic for Brian. Pet Sounds is absolutely riddled with alternate bass notes and interesting chord extensions, and this is about as straightforward as a chord progression gets, to go 1, 5, 1 in B flat. And yeah, that B3 organ is really kind of pronounced. It almost has this kind of like, I don't know what to say, like a rooster kind of blues sound. It's bending the notes. So it's, if you're in the key of B flat, the bluesy notes are flat 3 and flat 5 that bend up to 3 and 5. So we've all heard that sound, right? If I put a B flat 7 there, like blues, pretty bluesy. Beach Boys are not a very bluesy band, but this is kind of bluesy for them. And I think it's lulling the listener into a false sense of like, oh, this is a totally simple song. And you will hear there's a bass harmonica that comes in and goes, bow, bow. It's a really simple part. It's really interesting if you look through some of the liner notes of which instruments are used on different Brian Wilson songs, especially on Pet Sounds and Smile. You have these wild lists of. I would have loved to hear the phone call to the music union of like, oh, we need a bass harmonica player over here, Tommy, and can you get me like a couple 12 strings and a couple alto flutes and a timpani while you're at it? And he's just building these kind of like modular ensembles of and it's not, Brian didn't make this stuff up. He grew up in an era full of exotica records and big band and people using lots of textures in orchestration, but sometimes they were kind of similar. Like Frank Sinatra's was always going to have the strings and the saxophones and the big band with the strings, and it's not like he's going to bring in a bass harmonica for a song or something. So like Brian, I don't know if he was influenced by exotica records or what he might have been hearing on some of the film soundtrack stuff from Italy that might have been coming out at the time, but the 60s was this time of like really creative instruments being mixed together in unique ways, and Pet Sounds was kind of Brian's swan song. And Pet Sounds was, kind of Brian's masterpiece as far as that go, and Smile, as far as I'm concerned. Those two albums, the original Smile 67 sessions and Pet Sounds, was an absolute masterclass in using unique instruments. But bass harmonica is super prominent in the song, and I'm not sure I can name another song in pop music history where that's the case. There probably is one somewhere. There's probably one in a doo-wop song somewhere, but I can't think of one. And Brian really uses it. It's very loud. And when you have something like a bass harmonica, you don't need a complex part. It goes... Bo, bo. Bo, bo. I mean, it could not be a simpler part. So, just hearing a bass harmonica, it's a novelty a little bit. I think I just thought of something. I think there's a banjo in the song too that's overdubbed. It even sounds like it makes a mistake in this one part in the break, or the interlude, as I call it later. Anyway, real interesting instrument combinations, and that's all I'll get into for the most part of that, and we'll just kind of focus on the chords. So intro couldn't be simpler. One, with these bending minor third of B flat, minor third and flat 5 to 3 and 5. Bluesy notes. So the intro. And then you repeat it, bass harmonic. Bow, bow. Bow, bow. Then the bass comes in. Brian did these really interesting walking bass lines. The bass comes in right at the verse there, and the verse is basically the same chord progression, but it hangs on the 1 here for 2 bars instead of going to 5. So that's the verse. Very similar to the intro. And 1-5-1 is about the most simple chord progression in all of music. You can debate that 1-4-5, 1-6-4-5, but 1-5-1, I don't think there's anything more fundamental than that in music. If we're in B flat, it's probably I'm not sure what song Brian did of 1-5-1 before that. Maybe like When I Grow Up to Be a Man. Will I dig the same things that turned me on as a kid? So there's a verse with 1-5-1. Will I look back and say that I wish I hadn't done what I did? One of the absolute cornerstones of Western harmony, classical music. Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this channel, you probably know about the importance of 1-5-1. There's probably no more important chord progression, it's in so many music. I saw the harbor lights, but all the while my heart was shaking. Those same old harbor lights that once brought you to me. So yeah, 1-5-1, learn it, know it, but Brian is really milking the 1-5-1 in this intro and verse, and it's kind of uncharacteristic for Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds is a wildly complex, chord progression album. There's not a lot of just straight up 1-5-1s in there, other than Sloop John B is like a really simple kind of 1-4-5 a lot of the time, and that's the only other exception on the album as far as like really simple chords. But this song will take a turn in the pre-chorus and go into his kind of, key changing alternate bass note thing, which is a hallmark of Pet Sounds. So let me play it from the intro, and then we will, I'll sing the verse-ish, kind of. Bo, bass harmonica. Bo, bo. I know so many people think they can do it alone. They isolate their heads and stay in their safety zone. That's going into the pre-chorus there. So pretty simple form so far intro that's very similar to the verse. The verse just, lands on B flat for 2 bars instead of keeps going 1-5. 1-5, just like the intro did. Not a huge variation, but an interesting, subtle one. And then the pre-chorus actually modulates to the key of D flat, which we'll go over here in a minute. One thing I want to point out is Brian was really getting into like some melodic bass lines. Some of them are really simple, but the bass carries its own melody, and the bass oftentimes should carry its own melody. I think it's a lost art in a lot of ways, but it's not a big deal on the verse. I know so many people who think they can do it alone. So it's and it's interesting that it's using the dominant on the B flat, even though we're in B flat and the dominant note is not diatonic to B flat. Blues and rock mixed with major scales. For those of you who know songwriting, you can turn a 1 to dominant at any time. I mean, the commonplace in music would be like to go to 4, because if I'm in B flat and I turn 1 dominant, it becomes the 5 of 4, and that's one of our most common chord progressions, is a moving up a fourth to the 4 chord, which is E flat in the case of B flat. So don't be thrown off and think like, oh, we can't be in B flat major just because the bass line's doing a dominant. You can get away with murder in bass. I mean, I could be playing B flat major 7, and the bass could probably be hitting this A flat. I'm just guessing here. Yes. It's a little bit of tension, but I'm just saying. It's not going to majorly clash because they're an octave apart. And that's what's happening here is the bass is taking the liberty of just defining it as like a B flat 7 to F7 in the key of, even though the chord is not playing the B flat 7, just the bass. Melodic bass line. So yeah, that's the bass line of the verse. It's pretty simple, but it's very effective. It carries a little melody of its own. So the pre-chorus does something interesting, and we make a sudden modulation up a minor third. That's not super common, to the key of D flat, and then immediately adds, some alternate bass notes that really throws this whole thing for a loop. So let me play it from the verse, and then I'll try to sing the pre-chorus going into the chorus. Then we'll go back and kind of talk about the pre-chorus, but I just want to show you how it sounds. Coming out of the intro into the verse. I know so many people who think they can do it alone. They isolate their heads and stay in their safety zone. Modulation. But what can I tell them? And what can I say that won't make them defensive? Hang on to your ego. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose the fight. That was the chorus, and we're going back to verse 2. Take the repeat. So I'm just kind of showing you how it sounds. Now we'll go back and dive into what happened on this pre-chorus. Coming out of a simple 1-5-1. You just suddenly modulate to a new key, which you can just do to the key of the flat 3, which is a new key, D flat. So it does a tricky thing there, and it's very Brian Wilson to put flat 7 in the bass. Flat 7 is an incredibly effective bass note. Brian Wilson is one of his most common things, you know. Columnated ruins, D over C. So that's the song Surf's Up. Check out my whole lesson on that video and all kinds of other Beach Boys and amazing. Look at my playlists on my channel. I have all kinds of chord analysis for you aspiring songwriters looking to add more sophistication. But anyway, putting flat 7 in the bass adds a ton of tension, and it's very common in classical music with Beethoven and Mozart, and just to find that effective way to find, you know, a C with a B flat in the bass. So he's going to the key of D flat and basically going 1-5-1, and that would be kind of generic. It would be fine if he went, but how can I come on? It's not the end of the world to do that, but Brian's like, no, that's not it. That's not the Pet Sounds color that I'm looking for here. And so he really throws your ear for a loop because he just changed keys on you out of the verse. And out of nowhere, it's an unannounced modulation because there's no chord that leads to the D flat. It doesn't do like an A flat 7 first or whatever. So coming out of the verse, unannounced modulation. But how can I come on? Listen to that. A flat with G flat in the bass. So it's basically like an A flat 7 chord. I'm not calling it A flat 7 because I don't need the 7 up here. We have it in the bass. And I'm looking for no redundancy in this voicing. This is too much. So you could call that A flat 7, and it's actually functioning 100% as the 5 dominant of D flat. But the fact that he didn't just go to a regular A flat 7 really throws the ear for a loop. So coming out of the verse, unannounced modulation to D flat. Check out the bass. But what can I tell them? And what can I say that won't make them defensive? Hang on to your ego. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose the fight. That's the chorus. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But doesn't stay in D flat for long. He finds a really tricky way to resolve to the key of E flat. I can't really call it anything else because let's see from that pre-chorus. So 1-5-1 in D flat, but with that altered bass note, which really sets the tone here. Up until that point, this song had been completely a normal, 1-5-1 chord progression. But what can I tell them? And again, a melodic bass line. Listen. So he does this weird thing and somehow ends up for 2-3 bars in the key of E flat. And that is it. He makes it sound normal and it's like, oh yeah, that resolves. And you're like, no, how the hell are we in E flat for 3? And then we go back to the old key of B flat for the chorus. But pre-chorus, we got 1 in D flat, 5 with the 7 in the bass, back to 1. Now temporarily, this is 5 of D flat, but it's also 4 of the new key. And how do I know it's a new key? Because listen. So that little walk down. Everybody plays the fool. There's no exception to the rule. That is clear as day. It goes A flat and walks down to G minor, and the bass actually continues on F. I'm torn. I could have possibly called that F minor, but I didn't hear too many chords accentuating that. So it's like A flat, G minor, F in the bass, to E flat. There's absolutely no other key that can be to have a... So we're in E flat for a second. So how the heck did he go from 3 bars of D flat to resolving to E flat like it's nothing. And then he could have stayed in E flat and made it simple and been, I know there's an answer. But that's not what happened. It goes back to the key of B flat. I know there's an answer. Like it's nothing. And I'll show you why in a second. But yeah, that pre-chorus is wild. It really is the first time that it shows itself as, oh, this is that Pet Sounds chord language. So the verse, I know so many people who think they can do it alone. They isolate their heads and stay in their safety zone. Sudden modulation. But what can I tell them? And what can I say that won't make them defensive? Resolve to E flat, and immediately, I know there's an answer. I keep going between Hang On to Your Ego and I Know There's an Answer. For you Beach Boys geeks, you might know this song was originally called Hang On to Your Ego, and that's what Brian wanted to do it. He got some resistance, I think mostly from Mike Love. I think maybe a little from Al Jardine, who was having trouble with the lyric. But, Mike Love would definitely step in from time to time and kind of block some little more like out there ideas. And this was pre-Smile, so Pet Sounds is pretty out there for them at this point. After his whole album was a shock for Mike Love. But, I like the Hang On to Your Ego. He's kind of like dogging on hipsters. It really seems like the lyric really seems to be like a pointed attack at those hipsters who come off like they're so cool and whatever, but really inside they're kind of like douchey, uptight, kind of whatever. I think we still see some of those today. So Mike Love's complaining, I think, got Brian to agree to change it to I Know There's an Answer. And I Know There's an Answer is not bad. It's just a little more PC, a little less confrontational, and Hang On to Your Ego. So the difference in that sound on the chorus would be hang on to your ego, whoa. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose the fight. And a little more middle of the road, and like I said, it's not bad at all. I know there's an answer. I know now, but I have to find it by myself. So what ends up happening in that pre-chorus suddenly goes up from B flat to D flat, 1-5 with a weird bass note, to 1. Now A flat is temporarily in D flat and also E flat, and a resolution. Now check this out. In the key of E flat, which we're temporarily in, these next chords are actually in that key, right? In the key of E flat, a B flat would be 5 and G would be 3. But this chord progression, we know this from pop music history, is it's such a common 50s chord progression, a doo-wop chord progression. Going 1 to 6, that's called relative major and minor. The relative minor of B flat major is G minor, and the relative major of G minor is B flat major. They're related. So to say that this was still in E flat, even though those chords work there, this is very clearly 1-6, 1-6, 2-5 in B flat. So that's one of the beautiful things about related keys is E flat and B flat share common chords. I mean, they share a bunch of common chords. B flat is in both. G minor's in both. C minor's in both. F9 is not quite in both. It's like a 2 dominant of E flat, but yeah, that is a brilliant way is to use kind of related keys. Like E flat and B flat, because they're a fourth apart, are very much related. So Brian is really sneaky there with, well, how can I tell them? And what can I say that won't make them defensive? Hang on to your ego. And for those who might dispute what I'm saying and say, no, it really is an E flat, because that B flat is really just 5 and the G minor is really just 3. I mean, listen to the chord progression. I know there's an answer. I know now, but I have to find it. Right there. That's B flat major, not which It would be that note if it was an E flat major. It'd be the A flat. But instead, I have to find it by myself. The other really interesting thing here is like I said, this B flat to G minor is a very standard kind of 50s progression, you know, like that kind of thing of like, you know I'll always love you till the end, girl. You know I'll always love you till the end. You know I just want to be with you. No, I'll always love you till the end, girl. We've all heard that kind of thing a million times. So Brian, rather than go B flat, hang on to your ego, he throws a loop in it, kind of like he does in God Only Knows when he does D over A as the first chord progression. He puts the perfect fifth in the bass. I may not always love you. Instead of going B flat to G minor, he turns this chord progression on his head with one simple altered bass note. And he puts, instead of the B flat on the bass, he puts F in the bass, which is its perfect fifth, or the 5 of the key of B flat. So the chord progression, instead of this, it sounds like this. It's so good. You want to spice up your 1/6s, that typical chord progression we've heard so many times? Because instead of the falling motion, this is a raising motion, right? And with the lyric, I know there's an answer. It's kind of like hopeful to be going up instead of down. I know there's an answer. I know now, but I have to find it by myself. So the chord progression on this chorus is pretty simple. It's a like elevated because it uses some extensions, but it is essentially 1 to 6, you know, with that altered bass note, and again 1 to 6. Now 2, which is C minor 7, and now F9 sus4, which is a fancy way to say C minor 7 over F. Some of you might dispute the way I wrote that, but I wanted to show that it is indeed a 2-5-1 in B flat. And if I just wrote C minor 7 over F, it doesn't quite show that dominant movement. So C minor 7 is 2, and F9 sus4 is exactly the same notes. It's really just semantics, chord semantics. Same notes as C minor 7 over F. Same exact. So if I wrote C minor 7 over F right there, it wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be wrong. But I wanted to show the songwriter that it's a 2-5 happening, which is one of the most common chord progressions in music. So the chorus, 1-6, 1-6, 2-5. I know there's an answer. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose that fight. Hey, come on, like they're peaceful, but inside they're so uptight. Verse 2. Take the repeat. We trip through the days and waste all the thoughts at night. Change keys, the pre-chorus. But how can I come on and tell them the way that they live could be better? Hang on to your ego. Second chorus. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose that fight. What doobie-doobie-doo. How Pet Sounds is that? Then we need a bass harmonica solo. Brian knew what he was doing. The bass harmonica sounds freaking awesome. Yes, it is a bit of a novelty, but it's not like you listen and be like, oh, that's corny or something like that. It sounds great. And if you're going to get that bass harmonica solo guy, let's see, what's his name? Fun. Jay McGlory. Oh, no, that's the bass clarinet player. Tommy Morgan came in and played the bass harmonica, and he had a solo, and he still didn't like ask the guy to shred and do blues licks, and I'm sure this guy could. I think he just wanted to just keep going, you know, really simple, kind of wanking on one note. Because the timbre of that instrument speaks for itself. You don't need the guy to come in and shred, you know, some... Don't need him to shred some blues. I'm sure he could do it just fine. Discuss the song form for a second, and then we'll get to that thing I called Interlude 1. Intro is 4 bars. That's repeated, so it's 8 bars of 1-5-1. 1-5-1 in B flat. The verse is just as simple of 1-5-1 in B flat, and it rests on that B flat for 2 bars. That's 4 bars twice for the verse. And then the form of that pre-chorus is actually 6 bars. And I've talked about this a bunch of times. If you want really to add some life to your compositions, make sure they're not all in blocks of 4 bars of intro, 4 bars of verse, or 8 bars of verse, because that's 8's really just 4, right? It's doubled. So 4 bars of pre-chorus, 4 bars of chorus, 8 bars of solo. Those are all going to sound boring to the ear. You need to add in some blocks of 3 or blocks of 6 or blocks of 5, and you don't want to cut a bar just because you're trying to be interesting. It should flow naturally. And most of the time I'm writing or transcribing, I'm like, oh, listen to that. I didn't even realize that had an extra bar. It's usually just something that's like coincidental, or you figure it out later that like, oh, that's what's weird about that part. But I'm telling you, when I look down an arrangement and it's all blocks of either 4 or 8, it is boring. Doesn't mean it's a bad song. It's just like from an arrangement standpoint of view. And it doesn't have to be something drastic. And the cool thing here is the pre-chorus is a block of 6 bars, and the chorus is a block of 6 bars, and the interlude is a block of 3 bars. So those 3s and 6s are related, right? Because they're doubles of each other. 6 is double of 3. So the pre-chorus is, let's just go over and show you how it's 6, and the chorus is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then the chorus. 1, second bar of chorus, third bar of chorus, fourth bar of chorus, fifth bar of chorus, sixth bar of chorus. And then when it goes to the interlude, 1, 2, second bar, third bar. And then we're back to more like 4-bar blocks until it gets to the last pre-chorus and the last chorus, which are again 6. And then it does an interlude 2, which is essentially the same, another 3, and then an outro, which is just like the intro, but with the bass harmonica still kind of soloing a little bit, or the tambourines and the flutes kind of come in with a couple little simple lines, but it's still just that same thing as the intro 1-5-1 over and over to fade. So that the song form of this is not terribly interesting. The interesting parts I'm trying to point out there are is the pre-chorus has 6 bars, the chorus has 6 bars, and the interlude has 3 bars. And then song form-wise, intro, verse 1, pre-chorus, chorus, repeat, verse, pre-chorus, chorus. That's all pretty standard. Then you have this weird 3-bar interlude that just sounds so definitively Pet Sounds. Sophisticated, out of nowhere, not unlike that break in God Only Knows that is, or it's just kind of jarring, and it's pleasant sounding, but it just is not what you were expecting. So that interlude thing is probably one of the most interesting things there, and a lot of the instruments stop, and it seems like there's just flutes holding these kind of minor chords that are descending. And the bass is going boom, 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 boom. And then it comes back in with that banjo doing the comping and the bass harmonica solo. So I've gone over most of the chords there, except we have to explore the interlude and then the solo chords. So the interlude is kind of fascinating, and sometimes I analyze stuff and I try to put it in all these keys, and I am very well aware, you don't need to get mad at me at the comments, that there's no way that's what he was thinking here. Like, agreed. Like a lot of Brian's things, I know he knew theory and intervals and things like that, but I think a huge part of Brian's writing process was intuitive. So I don't think he's necessarily sitting there of like, oh, that's actually just a B flat 9, and then he may have been, but it might have just been something he was hearing in his head. He had a great ear, and I still like to kind of figure it out because cool things like that, you can find a way to justify them inside of a key. So let me show you what's going on in the basic part of the interlude, and it's really just taking minor chord shapes. So that's an F minor in the second inversion. F minor is this, but it's this inversion. So where it says B flat 9, no 3, this is most of the notes you need except this bass note. So I just want to show you, boom, F minor, then go down to E flat minor, D minor, and even this G flat 9, guess what, is a D flat minor, or C sharp minor, I don't know what you call it, D flat minor, and then the C minor, and then the F9 no 3 is really just a C minor. So in a way, I could have written all this is F minor, E flat minor, D minor, D flat minor, C minor, just kind of falling down. F minor, E flat minor, D minor, D flat minor, C minor. That is the essence of what's going on, and that's the most basic part of it. But I wanted to see that even if Brian wasn't thinking of it in this kind of geeky theory way, is there some other way that these chords fit in to the key of B flat as like elevated or extended chords? And lo and behold, it absolutely did, and that's what I wrote here. So I didn't write F minor, E flat minor, D minor, D flat minor, C minor. I wrote this chord progression that to me made more sense in the key of B flat. And like I said, probably not how he was thinking of it, but this is fantastic and fascinating. So the way I conceived it was B flat 9, no 3, and we're in the key of B flat, right? So remember I said 1 can become dominant at any time? So if we're in the key of B flat, a B flat 9 chord is a super obvious chord to, it'd be in the key pretty often. You turn 1 dominant. They turned 1 dominant, in the bass line earlier. So B flat 9 with no 3, don't you need a 3 to make a chord sound? Yes, technically you need a 3 to define a chord. So if you called this F minor over B flat, it would be 100% correct. But I think it's functioning as a 1 dominant chord. So listen, if I'm in the key of B flat, right? Now if I said B flat 9, that is most of the notes right there. It has the sound of B flat 9. It doesn't have a D, but this sound is surprisingly similar to this sound. So if I were in B flat and I said play B flat 9 and you played this, that is pretty much a B flat 9, although I have to say no 3 because there's technically not. You could call that F minor over B flat, but I think it's functioning as 1 dominant, and 1 dominant often moves up to 4. And what do you know that the next thing is E flat minor over D flat, which is 4. And it's not a diatonic 4, because in B flat major you have usually a major 4, but 4 minor, for you songwriters, you should know that is like one of the most sappy used chord progressions in the history of the world. The going 4 to 4 minor, or going straight to 4 minor. He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land. Here we come. Making all his nowhere plans for nobody. So there, in Nowhere Man, it goes 4 major to 4 minor, back to 1. But you're always welcome to just go straight to 4 minor. It happens so often in pop music. You have to know it's not diatonic, because diatonic would be E flat major. So Brian is taking that B flat 9, no 3, and then the next chord is E flat minor, which is like such a common chord in B flat, as like I said, non-diatonic. But he throws it for a loop by doing turning it on its head with a simple bass note adjustment. Anytime you put the flat 7 in the bass of either a major chord, like we talked about before, right? That sounds interesting, but the same is true for minor chords. If we have an E flat minor, he'd put that in the bass instead of this, and that's like wind chimes. Hanging down from D minor over C. Hanging down from... What if he put a D in the bass, like a normal minor? Hanging down. Not interesting at all. It has this falling sound, and it's, I will say, it's not super common in pop music. I mean, sometimes people do it as like a descending kind of thing, but to just go straight to a minor chord with that flat 7 in the bass is really an interesting sound. So if I didn't have that flat 7 in the bass, it would sound like this. Boring. Now listen to this with the flat 7 in the bass twice. The D minor has the flat 7 in the bass too. So remember I said the minor chords falling, F minor, F minor, E flat minor, D minor, D flat minor, C minor. Kind of goes down chromatically after the first interval of F to E flat. but I still am figuring out ways that these are functioning as something else. So it's functioning as a 1 dominant, B flat 9 over no 3, to 4 minor, which is E flat minor over D flat, to 3, which is D minor over C, and now this thing that I called the D flat minor, there's a G flat in the bass though, so that changes this chord to a G flat 9, no 3 again. So it's like repurposing that D flat minor chord because of that bass note of that G flat. And then the C minor is also being repurposed as an F9 no 3 chord. So if I took away the weird bass notes, what this interlude is actually is like a 1 dominant, 4 minor, 3, flat 6, 5, 1. Weird, huh? But he adds so much color with the weird bass notes and all the ambiguity of just the falling minor chord shapes. But it's whether he was thinking that or not, which I seriously doubt he was, it is very much functioning as 1 dominant, 4, 3, flat 6, 5. Could have called that a C minor, but it hits that in the bass, so I'm calling it a F9 no 3 because that flat 6, 5, and then to the solo, which is just that same thing as the verse, basically. 1, 5, 1. Then it changes keys and goes down a whole step to A flat. This is all the harmonica solo. Now we end up in A flat 7, and that actually leads, interestingly, to the pre-chorus, number 3. Remember I told you before the pre-choruses were unannounced? It went suddenly from B flat up to D flat, out of nowhere. But in this case, since he modulated down a whole step, and this was brilliant for that harmonica solo, it starts in B flat, it's just doing these little like kind of wails. And then it goes down a whole step to A flat and does the same chord progression in that key. And check this out. This A flat 7 now turns into an announced modulation because that's the 5 of this D flat. Before it was unannounced, now it's announced. That's interesting. Never seen that before. So yeah, the second half of that solo, A flat, announced. It goes to the pre-chorus 3. But how can I come on? And how can I talk when I know I'm guilty? Same. All of it's the same. I know there's an answer. So it comes out of that solo. Like I said before, the solo had modulated down from B flat to A flat, which perfectly leads up to the pre-chorus. It's actually like a modulation that makes sense from A flat 7 to D flat of the chorus. But how can I tell them? And how can I come on when I know I'm guilty? It does a little triplet there. And then goes right back into the chorus again, which there's no difference whatsoever between this chorus. Hang on to your ego. Whoa. Hang on now, but I know that you're gonna lose the fight. Da-dooby-dooby. Interlude 2, same. So the interlude 2 is pretty much the same as interlude 1, no real differences there. And then it ends up in the outro, which is the same chords as the intro. 1, 5 in B flat. And has that bass harmonica wailing again, almost like it's an outro solo. There's also these flutes doing these real simple lines over B flat. Some harmonies or some double harmony or something like that. They're all real simple kind of pedestrian lines that are nothing too special in and of themselves. That is pretty much the whole song. It does a cliche fade out. That's probably the least interesting part of the song. Fade outs are kind of a cheap way out, but tons of them are used in pop music, and no real demerit there for using a fade out, but it's not like an interesting ending or something. So that's the whole song. The song's got no drums, but there's somehow this driving beat because of those tambourines and timpanis and so the percussion, the basses, the B3 organ, the banjo. Very, very strange orchestration, and a little bit of a simple song in a way for Pet Sounds, but like I said before, nothing too, nothing too pedestrian. It's still got those real interesting bass notes on the pre-chorus and some key modulations and things like that. So that is pretty much the whole song. I hope you enjoyed it, and please come and join me on my Patreon to help support this channel better so I can give you more of this type of content. Thanks a lot for watching this video and taking an interest in my channel. Please help me reach a larger audience by hitting subscribe below and ringing the notification bell. Check out my video playlist page to find the categories that most interest you. Leave me a super thanks here on YouTube, and even better, come join my Patreon. Please consider buying music for my original projects I.S.S. and High Castle Teleorchestra. Also, don't forget to sign up for my email list on the front page of timsmolens.com. You can find information about all of those things in the description below. Thanks again.